Hey boys and girls, I hope everyone's doing great on this Wednesday morning. Yesterday I gave you guys the assignment after we finished our story from Miss Ida's porch to go to an adult in your family or somebody who you respect and to ask them to tell you a story and then to write down their story in your own journal. And so I actually did the same thing. I called my mom and I asked her to tell me a story from our family. And she told me this story that is pretty relatable in this time. She told me the story of my great-grandmother, whose name is Virginia, which is the same name as me. So I was named after her. And she told me this story that when my great-grandmother was a small child in the 1930s, there was this disease going around called, I think it was scarlet fever. And this disease was very, very, very contagious. And if one person in the family got the disease, they had to be quarantined. And now, boys and girls, we all know what the word quarantined means now because we are in quarantine. So instead of a whole entire community going into quarantine, what the government would do is when somebody got this disease, they would just put the family into quarantine. So my great-grandmother's family got put into quarantine in their house, which means they weren't allowed to leave their house. The rest of the city could, but they were not allowed to leave their house. And my grandpa, or I guess my great-great-great-grandpa, so my great-grandmother's dad, he was at work when the house got put into quarantine and he was not allowed back in. So the whole family, the mom, my great-grandmother who was a kid, and her siblings, about 5 or 6 of them, were all stuck in the house. They weren't allowed to leave and their dad wasn't allowed to come back in because of the quarantine. Well, my great-grandmother Virginia, her mom and her dad loved each other so much that my great-great-great-grandfather, Virginia's dad, he would sneak into the house late at night, even though they were in quarantine, and he would sit down with his wife and he would have coffee with her. He would break these rules because he loved her so much that he couldn't stand to be separated. So they would have coffee in the kitchen and all of his kids would sit around and they would just watch. And that's just kind of a sweet memory that Virginia had, my great-great-grandmother, or my great-grandmother. And I just thought that that was one kind of like a memoir that I would share with you guys. And I think it's cool. Ava's going to join us for a little bit. I think that it's cool that family members can help us just figure out where we came from. We talked about that in our story yesterday. You have to know where you came from so that you can move forward. And so I hope you guys got to hear some interesting stories from your family members. And then today's story is also kind of makes me think of my family. Hold on, let me put my dog away. I'll be right back. Come on, Ava. Okay, so this story is kind of important to me too because as you guys know, my other grandmother is Japanese, and this tale right here is kind of like a Japanese folk tale. So it's a fictional story. It's based on Japanese culture and tradition, and we're going to talk about a few things in this story. It's called The Paper Crane. The Paper Crane by Molly Bang. A man once owned a restaurant on a busy road. He loved to cook good food and he loved to serve it. He worked from morning until night and he was happy. But a new highway was built close by. Travelers drove straight from one place to another and no longer stopped at the restaurant. Many days went by when no guests came at all. The man became very poor and had nothing to do but dust and polish his empty plates and tables. So like I said earlier, the setting of this story is Japan, right? So there's going to be some elements of Japanese culture in this story that I want us to notice. One evening, a stranger came into the restaurant. His clothes were old and worn, but he had an unusual, gentle manner. Now, boys and girls, I want you guys to notice there's some characters in this story who are going to talk, but there's one character on every page who doesn't say a word, but he kind of plays an important part in our story, and I want you to think who that character is. Though he said he had no money to pay for food, the owner invited him to sit down. He cooked the best meal he could make and served him like a king. When the stranger had finished, he said to his host, "I cannot pay you with money, but I would like to thank you in my own way." Look. Boys and girls, what do you think? Make a prediction. What do you think the old man is going to pay him with? He picked up a paper napkin from the table and folded it into the shape of a crane. "You have only to clap your hands," he said, "and this bird will come to life and dance for you. Take it and enjoy it while it is with you." With these words, the stranger left. What would you do if you owned a restaurant and someone tried to pay you with a paper crane? It happened just as the stranger had said. The owner had only to clap his hands, and the paper crane became a living bird. It flew down to the floor and danced. Now let's stop right there and let's make a prediction. So, the restaurant was losing business because of the highway. A strange man came in, he couldn't pay, but the owner was kind and he gave him food and treated him well, and he gave him a paper crane that dances. What do you think is going to happen to the man's restaurant? What do you boys and girls think will happen to the man's restaurant? Soon, word of the dancing crane spread, and people came from far and near to see the magical bird perform. The owner was happy again, for his restaurant was full of guests. He cooked and served and had company from morning until night. The weeks passed and the months. Why don't you guys try, and while I'm showing you this picture, try and find our other character? The one who doesn't speak, but he is on every page. One evening, a man came into the restaurant. His clothes were old and worn, but he had an unusual, gentle manner. The owner knew him at once and was overjoyed. Boys and girls, who is it? That's right. It's the same old man. What do you think he will do? The stranger, however, said nothing. He took his flute from his pocket, raised it to its lips, and began to play. Now we can make a pretty good prediction what we think will happen next. The crane plays to music, right? Well, if this is the man who made the crane, what do we think will happen? The crane flew down from its place on the shelf and danced as it had never danced before. The stranger finished playing, lowered the flute from his lips, and returned it to his pocket. He climbed on the back of the crane, and they flew out the door and away. Did anybody see that coming? The first time I read this story and I got to this page, I said, "What? He flew away on the crane?" That was a surprising element to me. I did not predict that. The restaurant still stands by the side of the road, and guests still come to eat the good food and hear the story of the gentle stranger and the magic crane from the paper napkin. But neither the stranger nor the dancing crane has ever been seen again. And that is the end of our story. So boys and girls, there's a few questions I want you guys to think about. So first of all, part of the Japanese culture in this story is that these paper cranes, they're known to represent good luck. So in our own culture, kind of where we live, there are certain things that represent good luck. For example, you might pick this thing out of the grass and it's supposed to represent good luck. There's some things you can put on your keychain that are supposed to bring you good luck. Some people do traditions, or they do little superstitious things that they think will bring them good luck. And in Japan, they do believe that these paper cranes will bring them good luck. So in the comments below, I want you guys to put, what are 2 traditions in the United States or wherever you're from that are supposed to bring you good luck? The one that I was thinking of was a 4-leafed clover. And there's a few other things people do to bring them good luck. It's kind of just a silly thing we believe, but think about that. And then I want you guys to think about the boy in this story, right? This little boy right here, he doesn't say any words, but throughout the story, he's in every single picture. What do you think the purpose of the little boy is? Why do you think the author chose to include the little boy in this story? Other than that, boys and girls, you don't have a writing prompt for today. You've already had 2 writing prompts this week. You had to finish up your essay, and then you were supposed to write in your journal a story that you asked your family member. Well, what I need you guys to do, you have to do 3 Achieve articles for me this week. At least 3 Achieve articles for me. And then you also have to check into Google Classroom every day. So make sure you're doing those 2 things for me, and you'll be all set. And I miss you guys so much. Ava misses you guys too, and I hope everyone has a wonderful Wednesday.